So I was contacted by somebody called Sarah who lives in Manchester who wants to know about EVs. First time driver, just passed her driving test and had some really good questions that she emailed to me. So I thought this is a really good opportunity for me to interview her, and she was willing to be interviewed on camera. So I set up a Zoom call. Let's get straight into it. As I said in my intro, this is Sarah who's from Manchester. So Sarah, just tell me basically the email that you sent me.
So yes, I reached out to you and I passed my test about 7 weeks ago now. And obviously now I'm looking for a car. I've started off looking at sort of your traditional ICE cars, and looked at loads, went to different car dealerships, and sort of settled on a VW Golf or a Renault Captur.
Okay.
I like the size of both of those, and I felt similar to what I learned in, which was a Renault Clio.
Yeah.
But when I started looking at aftermarket prices, they were around 14,500, 16.
Yeah.
So I went to see what I could get for that sort of money, and turned out Tesla Model 3 was about 15,500, 16.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was going to be so much out of my budget. So I went for a test drive and absolutely loved it.
Right. Brilliant.
Um, and from there, I started looking at other EVs, went for a test drive in three or four of them. And it's been a journey ever since.
Yeah. Very good. So is it safe to say you are a bit of a sort of a car person? Have you always loved cars?
Not at all.
Oh,
So as of 2 months ago, I knew literally nothing.
okay.
If it was a red one or a blue one, that was about as far as I went.
Brilliant. So unlike people like me and my other friends that are really into cars, particularly EVs, you just want a tool then, don't you, to get you from A to B? And
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
recently passed your driving test, which is great. And obviously, you've got a choice of fossil fuel, dirty dino juice powered vehicles or EVs. What drew you to EVs?
Um, it was a slow transition. I started looking at nice cars, as I mentioned.
Mm,
Then I started looking at hybrids because obviously you've got better efficiency. So it was things like the Hyundai Ioniq, which is at a really good price right now. You can get them for about 9,500.
yeah,
But then when I looked at electronic ones, and sort of my needs, it was going to do most of what I needed, and it was just simple. The acceleration gave me a lot more confidence on things like roundabouts,
yeah.
just that straight off the go.
So
Uh,
basically, it's the driving experience after you're doing some test drives that sort of thought, oh, this is something that I could be interested in and look towards. So, what are some of the questions you sent me?
so the first one, sort of very generic, is an EV a first good car?
Of course, I'm going to say yes because I'm a bit biased, but like we just touched on, it covers all the bases that a normal ICE car does. So I'm going to say yes.
Fair enough. Um, so after that, I started looking sort of how would insurance compare for a nice car, if
Yeah.
it's more money.
So it is a hot topic. It's still based on the value of the vehicle. So you will read that insurance costs for electric vehicles are quite high, but they're quite high for everything. Everything has gone up on the insurance market, but it is still based from the insurance point of view is how much have we got to pay out if this gets written off? The supply of spares for Tesla have been a little bit long, to say the least. So sometimes, if you need a new wing for a Tesla, it might take 3 to 4 months for them to send one. I know windscreens in the past have been a long wait, but that's just supply and demand, and that will improve. So insurance companies tend to load certain cars up if they know it's going to be a long time in the body shop because of a parts shortage or unavailability. Then they factor in the fact that they're going to have to pay for a hire car for you for longer. So they factor that in. But I can see over the next few months slash years, that scenario coming down as parts availability for Tesla improves. But generally, they're no more expensive to insure than ICE vehicles.
It's good to know. So obviously I'm looking at buying one soon. One of my big questions when I go to a dealer is how much of the battery is left. And I've
Yeah,
seen a few things online about sort of getting the car into service mode and being able to check that way. But is there any way for sort of someone like me to just check it at a dealership easily?
Depends on what the car is. If it's the old style Nissan Leaf, you had sort of capacity bars at the side of the dashboard that gave you a very rough idea of the capacity or the degradation within the battery. But overall, the modern batteries with the modern chemistries, in the Nissan Leaf have the old style chemistry, which did degrade over time and distance and number of charges. But with the new EVs, the degradation is far less because they build in basically a contingency. So there's like a big buffer at the top of the battery and a buffer at the bottom of the battery. So it will more than likely read 100% state of health for years, because that invisible bit of the battery has actually degraded without you actually noticing any effect in range. So that's what the likes of Kia and Hyundai have done. And Tesla, for instance, they do recommend you don't charge to 100% on the traditional Tesla lithium-ion battery. The newer LFP battery from Tesla, they do recommend you charge to 100% because, again, that's got a different battery chemistry. Also, most manufacturers have a huge warranty on the battery capacity, whereby, as a general rule, on average, they say if it drops below 70% state of health or capacity within 8 or 10 years, they will replace the offending cell or replace the pack. So that's how confident most manufacturers are. So to be honest, it's not really an issue on battery life.
It's good to know. And that's one of the things I've been looking for on second-hand cars, is making sure they're under that 100,000 threshold.
Yes.
By as much as I want to use it, really.
Yes. And that's not to say, I mean, there's plenty of EVs, particularly Teslas, that have been used as taxis with, 300, 400. Some have got 500,000 miles on the clock. It's still on the same battery. So, it's not like at 100,000 miles, it's suddenly going to start working. But the manufacturers put a warranty in to so far. But they are capable of huge mileages.
Awesome. So I'm going to be showing my ignorance a bit here, but one of the reasons that I want the car is to do sort of weekend trips for Lake District, Peak District, slightly rougher roads. So partly what I wanted to ascertain is whether the car is going to drive different. So my limited knowledge, your traditional ICE car, it's got big engine up the front.
Yeah.
Whereas your new EV car, it's got sort of the battery along the bottom instead.
Yeah.
Does that change the driving experience at all, or is it the handling?
The handling is actually better because the centre of gravity is quite low and the weight distribution between the front and the back axle is basically 50-50 because the weight isn't all over the front. And then you get, with an ICE car, it's almost like a pendulum effect. So if you go into a corner too quick, and you jump on the brakes, then that distribution of weight will want to shift around and you'll lose grip and handling. But with an EV, low centre of gravity, 50-50 weight distribution, they're really good on the road. They're better than an ICE car.
Awesome. And does that apply to potholes too?
Yeah, well, again, it depends on the suspension setup. So some EVs, like the Tesla Model 3 Performance, has got a very stiff suspension, so it can be quite crashy over potholes. Whereas something else, like the Kia Niro, is quite softly sprung, so a little bit more forgiving. So the Tesla Model 3 Performance would be amazing on the track, silky smooth tarmac. It would be not too great or comfortable experience on a pothole road, whereas the Kia will be rubbish on the track, but great down your average UK road.
Perfect. Let's have a quick look. So I think we've already touched on replacement parts of the EVs. How about tyres? Do I need to be looking for special tyres?
You can. So Hankook are a tyre manufacturer who are now concentrating on the EV market. So they will make various claims and have designed their tyres to be efficient and have a low noise rating for obvious reasons. So if you're looking for tyres, just look for the least rolling resistance and obviously good grip in the wet and the snow, and all-weather tyres or all-season tyres. But generally, you can go for EV specific tyre, or just go for one that's just got a good write-up. So at the minute, I've got Goodyears on my Kia e-Niro, and I changed over from Firestones, which were quite noisy, and I've just changed to Goodyears. So, and they're not EV specific, but they are very low rolling resistance, and have got a good low noise rating. So, yeah, just shop around for something that will suit an EV. Renault did for a while have a tie-up with Michelin to make EV specific tyres for the Zoe. They were horrendously expensive. So read into that what you want.
No, the ones I found last night for one of the cars I'm interested in potentially is, I think, a brand called 𝐶TEC.
Yeah,
And I think more on the budget end, but they seem to be getting good reviews.
yeah,
It's just, as I said, it's hard to know what you need, really.
yeah.
Um, let's have a quick look then. So this one's going to be really subjective, but what's a good amount of range to feel comfortable, I guess?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Sarah. So I personally think, as you all know, I live on the Orkney Islands, so I'm due to travel down to see my mum in 2 or 3 weeks' time in Leicestershire, which is getting on for 650 miles. So for me personally, the sweet spot is around 250 to 300 mile range. If I drive for 250 miles non-stop on normal roads up here in Scotland, going south down the A9, I'm going to have to be driving for the best part of 4.5 to 5 hours. Without being crude, my bladder doesn't last that long. It really doesn't. I have to stop. The thing I have done on previous videos, I've deliberately not drank tea and coffee in the morning, just drank water, and that does improve my range, not the car's range. So my sweet spot is 250 to 300 miles, and I think that would cover 95% of UK drivers, and those 5% that want to drive further. Should they really be driving for longer than 5 hours without a break? But you still hear people saying, I want to drive from Land's End to John O'Groats non-stop in my 700-mile range diesel thing. Well, not safe. So, yeah, minor rant, but I like to stop after 250 miles because I'm done.
Yeah, no, that's very reasonable. I think my parents down in Devon, and I think it's about a 300-mile journey.
Yeah.
And I always thought one stop, that's fine, but two stops, that's getting into the sort of, it's adding a lot of time to the journey territory.
Well, with a Kia e-Niro, that would be easy. So you'd stop one stop after, let's say, 200 miles. So if you've been driving at 50 miles an hour on our wonderful UK motorway network with roadworks and traffic, on average 50 miles an hour, you've been driving for 4 hours. And then you stop for stretch your legs, have something to eat, and then stop at the services and rapid charge it, and then do the rest of the way in comfort.
Sounds good. So EV prices have obviously come down a lot. I think Tesla's for something like 14 new, and they're down to 15, 16 now. Is it likely to continue? Do we not know yet? Is it worth leasing them instead of buying them outright? What have you seen over your last 10 years?
So COVID threw a massive curveball into the whole of the motor industry because of supply and demand and lack of parts to make EVs. So just looking at EVs in particular, I know several people that will buy a brand new, the Ioniq 5. My friend Andrew Till on YouTube bought an Ioniq 5, ordered one before they came out. He ran it for 6 or 8 months and sold it for about £1,000 more than he paid for it brand new. Now that sort of set the scene, and everyone assumed that EVs were an investment. Vehicles have never been an investment. They're a necessary evil, whichever way you want to look at it, and they will cost you money. They will depreciate. So in the early days of COVID, EVs would actually appreciate, but then when everything settled down and supply was meeting the demand, then prices started to drop, and then we had the rising cost of living. the rising cost of electricity during sort of the Russian crisis, and electricity prices went up, which reflected in fuel generally. So there was almost this perfect storm for everyone to realise that EVs do depreciate. And there's also, I'm not into conspiracy theories, but there's also this backstory of the motor trade generally not really embracing EVs and being a bit, because to them, their long-term business plan has always been sell someone a car, then have them back for servicing, have them back for parts, and that's where dealerships make their money, is on servicing. And with EVs requiring less servicing, surprisingly enough, they're none too keen on this newfangled thing of electric vehicles coming in, because it's going to affect their business model massively. I just going off topic slightly, I went to a Jaguar dealer about 6 years ago in Leicester when I was visiting my parents, who had found me on the YouTubes, and massive franchise dealership selling Jaguars. And he said, look, the I-Pace, nice car, but where do you see the future for me as a dealership? Beautiful, massive glass showroom. He said, what can I upsell my customers after they bought an electric car, the I-Pace, when they come back? I said, well, there's tyres, and there's wiper blades, and there's screen wash, and a pollen filter. And he basically went, is that it? I went, yeah. And he said, well, we can't really sustain turning a profit to keep this beautiful big glass showroom functioning on selling tyres, wipers, and screen wash. So that sort of illustrates the dilemma that big dealerships have got, is that there's massive change ahead. Gone slightly off topic, but that's why there's this adjustment going on within the motor trade with regard to values. So the second half of your question, it is quite a sensible thing to perhaps get a personal contract hire vehicle or a lease vehicle, and then the uncertainty of future residual values is with the funder, not with you. You're just paying a monthly fixed amount that guarantees where you are. And at the end of 2 or 3 years, or however long you have the term, you can hand the car back and get the next latest model. And that's been very popular. People like it as well because the technology is changing quick. Battery technology will continue to change. And the next thing that's allegedly on the horizon with MG is solid state batteries, which is an entirely different chemistry. And they're looking at 400-500 mile range out of a similar sized MG4, MG5. So technology is changing. So people like the thought of just dipping the toe in now and leasing something, and then seeing what the market's like in a few years' time.
Awesome. And I guess on a related point, and I'm springing this one on you, have you got any fears about any of the Chinese firms flooding the market in the near future? Because you've got the likes of MG and BYD coming along.
Yeah, I just say, just bring it on. They're so well built. I drove a BYD Atto 3. We actually drove it to Paris as part of the London to Brighton run a couple of years ago when I was with Drive Electric. Great car, really, really well screwed together. And I'll be honest, compared to some of the Stellantis offerings, that's Vauxhall, Citroën, Peugeot, the Atto 3 was very, very well screwed together, and the fit and finish was amazing, and the efficiency was just brilliant, and the charging speed wasn't too shabby on a rapid either. So yeah, Chinese are coming. In fact, they're here and they're pushing forward, and it's great tech, really is.
I did go for a test drive in a MG ZS, and it was a lovely vehicle. It had one or two things I didn't like about it, but apart from that, it felt really nice. And it's a very good price at the moment.
Yeah. And as regards length of life, my friend James of James and Kate on YouTube, he works for, he's got a business, a mobile servicing business called Cleveland EV Mobile. And they run, I think they've now got 5 or 6 MG5s. And they're 2, 3, and 3.5 years old. And they've all got over 100,000 miles on them. And all they've replaced is wipers and tyres. In fact, James did a video, and I'll put a link in the description, of him looking at his MG5 with 140,000 miles and he did a battery degradation test because he's got the equipment to do that, and I think it was at 93%.
Argue it, can you?
I'll put a link because it's amazing. So and he's on the same set of brakes. So the MGs are a cracking EV. They're really, really good.
Awesome. So a few more generic questions now. So obviously, being my first EV, I've not got a home charger yet. I do happen to have a public charging point on the road opposite me, so that's my plan for initial usage. But obviously, I want to get one long term. Any firms you'd suggest, or any types I need to look out for?
So if you've got solar, I've got solar here, or a wind turbine, or any renewables, then I really recommend the Zappi, because basically the My Energy group of products will basically talk to your renewables at home, your solar panels or your wind turbine, and charge your car accordingly, as well as storage and other smart things around the home. So I love the Zappi, but if you haven't got any renewables, any of the chargers that have app connectivity are something I recommend, because there's nothing nicer than getting your phone and changing the charge times to suit a charge rate from your electricity provider. So I personally like Octopus Energy. Again, I'll put a link in below in the description. And with Octopus, I'm on a tariff called the Octopus Go, which means from 12:30 a.m. to 5:30 a.m. at the moment, at time of recording, where are we, 17th of October, I'm paying 7 pence per unit. And in the day, I think I'm paying 23p. So I make all the charging of my EV when I can't charge from solar. I do it on the cheap rate overnight. It's not just for the EV either. So we can set the dishwasher, tumble dryer, heat my heat battery for my hot water. I can do all those things in the winter when there's not a lot of sunlight. I can do it on the cheap rate. So although it's called Octopus Go, specifically designed for charging EVs, it doesn't matter what you use electricity for. They're not going to come around and smack your wrist for doing the washing at 1 o'clock in the morning. So Octopus Go tariff is brilliant.
Sounds good. It's interesting that you raise Octopus. That's one of the ones I looked into. And I think I saw something like a cost analysis where it made a lot of sense if you're doing more than about 10,000 miles. But if you're doing less than that, I work from home, so I have to use a lot of electricity during the day, and I can't really avoid that. So I'm guessing I'm right in thinking that it sort of depends how much mileage and how much charging you need to do.
That's not something I've come across, to be honest, but I'm rather skewed because I've got battery storage, so I store a lot of energy off the roof when I'm out and I'm not at home. So my usage is such that it's good value for me to use Octopus Go, but they do have lots of different tariffs to suit people's different usage patterns. But there's other providers as well. E.ON, what's the other one? What's that French? EDF. They've got some EV tariffs. But yeah, basically just shop around for what suits you.
Good to know. Let's have a quick look. How about charger types? So this is something I've seen lots of names thrown around, like 11 kilowatt chargers and three-pronged ones and granny chargers.
Yeah.
What do I have to be looking for? It's a strange new world.
It's always good to have a granny cable, which is sort of the term. I am a granddad, so I can say it with confidence. It's the slowest way of charging your EV is a 3-pin plug, and for every 1 hour it's charged in, it'll add around 9 miles range. So it's charging at about 2 kilowatts. So at home, what you can have is called a 7 kilowatt charger. Now, you can't, if you wanted to charge at 11 kilowatts, you'd have to have a 3-phase supply fitted to your house, which would be horrendously expensive. So basically, the choice you've got for the homeowner is your granny cable or a 7 kilowatt charger. Now, at 7 kilowatts, most EVs will charge at the rate of around 25 miles for every 1 hour you're plugged in. Just very quickly, so it depends with the onboard charger that's built into the car. A lot of people think that the actual thing that's on the front of your house to charge your car is called a charger. Technically, it's a dispenser for electricity. The actual charger is built into the car under the bonnet. So with some, just as an example, you can get what's called a 3.3 kilowatt Nissan Leaf, the old Nissan Leaf. You can plug it into a 7 kilowatt charger, but the Leaf is only asking for 3 kilowatts because it's limited by its onboard charger. The charger's saying, I can give you 7. The car's saying, I can only suck 3. So, and it's the same with my 𝐸 Niro. It's got what's called a 3-phase 11 kilowatt onboard charger, but my house, my Zappi will only push out, because I've only got a 2-phase supply, will only push out 7 kilowatts. So my car's asking for 11, but it's only being given 7. So it's, yeah.
And are there chargers in the wild that will give you 11 kilowatts, or do they tend to be more because they're
there is. Yeah, they're called fast chargers, where you need your Type 2 cable that will come with the car to plug into the public socket, and the other one to plug into the car. It depends on whether the charger is actually listed on one of the many apps and websites as a 22 kilowatt charger, and whether your EV can take 22 kilowatts. For instance, the Kia Niro 4 Plus does have an 11 kilowatt onboard AC charger. The 3 and the level 2 Niro only has a 7 kilowatt charger. So if you were to have them both together, both plugging into a 22 kilowatt fast charger, one Niro would only pull 7, but my Niro would pull 11 kilowatts.
It's quite a difference.
On-built charger, yeah. That's why I like this 4 Plus. It's just a great all-round EV.
Does seem good. How about emergency kit that you take in your car? Do you, for my mobile phone, I carry around a little portable battery everywhere.
Yes.
So if I run out of battery, I can charge it up.
Excellent. I bring this. It's called a Trek Power. It's basically a big power pack, which is useful for plugging in, like, you know, it's got USB ports on it and everything. But it also comes with basically a set of jump leads. So the Achilles heel of all EVs is the 12-volt battery. So you might have a full 100% charged EV, charged up overnight, but the 12-volt lead-acid battery has failed. They last about 3 years. The car will not start, even though you've got a full traction battery, if the lead-acid 12-volt is dead. And basically what the 12-volt does, when you go in and open the car and press the power button, it wakes the computer up and makes all the contacts within the car to allow the massive amount of energy from the battery into the motor and makes it move. But if the 12-volt battery is dead, it won't make those contacts, and you're just stuffed. You'll have to get a jump or a new 12-volt battery. Has been an issue like that for a while. What Tesla have done, and I think all the manufacturers will do it in the future, they're fitting lithium-ion 12-volt batteries, if you like, which have got a much longer shelf life than lead-acid ones. But yeah, that's what I carry around with me as an auxiliary power pack in case my 12-volt goes dead. Hasn't done yet in 3.5 years. It's never once let me down. But if you weren't to shut the boot properly or shut a door properly on a windless night and the courtesy light stayed on in the car, as you know, overnight you drain the battery and you won't be able to move it the next day.
Yeah. No, that's good to know. So one of the big things I found when I was looking at Model 3s was a fault called phantom braking.
Yes.
Have you come across that one before? Is it still a problem? Is it a problem with other cars too?
No. So the only time I've seen it possibly in my Niro is when I've got cruise control fitted, an adaptive cruise, which maintains the gap between you and the car in front. And the car turns off and I want to carry on. The car has a little bit of a wobbly because it thinks I'm going to run into the back of the car. So then the car is braked quite suddenly, but that's because I had it on cruise control. And it's easy to override it by just squeezing the throttle gently and it can just cancel it. But it has been a thing with Tesla. But again, with Tesla, there's over-the-air updates, and I think a lot of that will be eliminated. But it's not a thing about EVs. Phantom braking. No.
From what I've researched, I think it might be more to do with Tesla relying just on cameras as opposed to all the cars.
Yeah.
But nobody was quite sure, really.
No.
So you touched on automatic cruise control. How do the self-driving features of other cars compare to Tesla?
I like the adaptive cruise control on my Niro. Others have got features. Tesla still are leading the way when it comes to autonomous driving, or a next level up of autopilot. Full driverless driving features, full autonomous, I think is a few years away, particularly here in the UK because of legislation and rules. You're basically asking the car to make a decision. I'm going to hit somebody in an accident. Do I hit the dog or do I hit the old lady? Because the car's got to make that moral judgment that we as humans make. It's best to hit a cat. I love cats. It's better to hit a cat than perhaps a toddler running across the road chasing after a ball. So it's those sort of moral questions that they're yet to address.
Good to know. I've seen a few videos and I think they work great on motorways, but essentially anything outside of motorways and you're on your own.
Yeah.
So the big one that everybody always mentions, big advantage for buying Tesla, it's the charging network.
Yes.
Are other networks catching up? Have you found Teslas to be better and more useful than anybody else's?
Yeah, Tesla is seamless. It really is. But what they have done, they've opened up their network. 90% of the Tesla network is opened up to any electric vehicle. So you basically download an app, and I've used it on my 𝑒:Niro. Blisteringly simple, blisteringly quick, and very reasonably priced. So up here in Scotland, the Charge Place Scotland network is appalling. Used to be one of the best in the UK. It's now one of the worst. So I just aim for Tesla or GridServe or Ionity or Osprey or a raft of others that are easy to use. But Tesla network, really, really good. Just a word of caution, some MGs are not able to use the Tesla network because of the communication between the car and Tesla. So I know the MG, James has told me the MG5 doesn't work, needs a hardware update, but 95% of other EVs will work quite happily on the Tesla network.
So I know that Tesla can direct you to charging points. So if you're planning a navigation, it will point you to where you need to go.
Yes.
How do other models do that? Do they have sort of route finders?
In a word, no. So those that you can plot a route to, you've got to put your own destination in your postcode. And some makes and models will give advice, but it's not always that accurate. So you can download an app that you can use with Android Auto or Apple CarPlay called A Better Route Planner. When you put in lots of details like your car and the size of the battery, you plug in what's called a dongle into an OBD, that's the onboard diagnostic. And basically the app can talk to the car and see how the car's performing and what battery's left. And on the basis of that, it will then advise the next nearest available rapid charger. It's okay, but it's not as reliable as Tesla's network. Because with Tesla, they can actually know how many people are actually at that supercharger site and whether it's obviously operating and it's down or whatever. So Tesla's certainly got long-range mapping for charging off to a T, but there are other apps you could try.
Okay, it's good to know. And one of the other things about Teslas is I know they've got sort of built-in apps to control the car, and a big one was the preheat function.
Yes.
Do other models have preheat functions? Do they have apps that you tie in with the car?
Yeah, most do. Most are still free. Some require to be plugged into a charger in order for them to preheat from the grid rather than their own battery. And most, if it's below a certain percentage, won't allow you to preheat the car if the battery's at like 30% or less. Again, I'm not au fait with all the makes and models. Only suffice to say that my Kia 𝐸_NIRO, the 4 Plus, does have an excellent app where you can preheat the car. I think it lasts for about 10 minutes and then it switches off again. But the preheat is available on most. Again, Tesla lead the way when it comes to the ease of preheating their cars via the app.
Definitely sounds like it's worth doing that preheat.
Yeah,
it seems quite efficient.
And like with my 𝐸_NIRO, in fact, when I went south last week, it was plugged in, it was fully charged, but it was about, I think it was 5:45 in the morning. We're about to catch a ferry. And although it wasn't freezing, it was cold. So I just tapped a few buttons on the Kia app and it started to preheat the car from my mains electricity. rather from the stored power in the car, which is obviously I want to leave with 100% in the battery and a nice toasty warm car. It also puts on the heated steering wheel and demists the windscreen as well, which is useful.
Will it de-ice as well, or is that going a bit too far?
Yeah, it will, but it can only stay on for like 10 minutes. So you get a little notification on the Kia app to say the preheat's ended, and it's just a question of tapping it again to do it again, which is a little annoying, but yeah, it works well.
Awesome. And there was one more question that I meant to ask earlier, so it's not test related. It's more a generic, if I'm going to a showroom to see a used EV car, what sorts of things should I be looking at? You've obviously got tyres, but I don't know, there's not really an engine to check, is there?
No, that's right. So there's no oil dipstick to have a look at and fluids, etc. Any showroom should know what they're selling, so they should, feel free to ask the salesman questions about the EV that they're selling. If you've done your research beforehand, which a lot of new EV buyers do, they often know more than their salesman. But things to
Certainly
check,
been my experience.
right? Yeah. So the things to check, obviously, if you jump into two, let's just say Tesla Model 3s, and one has got the heater on and one hasn't got the heater on, and they're both 100% charged, one will show, I don't know, 230-mile range, and one might show 200-mile range, only because the heater's been on. And conversely, if a car's been driven really, rapidly around the forecourt a few times, have it valeted and cleaned and taken somewhere else, and someone just like really enjoyed the talk, then the guesstimated range at 100% will be less than someone who's driven it steadily for two or 300 miles. So just turning the car on and looking at the estimated range is just that still. It's just the estimated range. Low tyre pressures can cause the range to appear to be a lot lower because there's extra drag. So which is the benefit of basically getting a car with a long battery warranty. So you're sort of covered. So unfortunately, when you walk into a showroom, there's no real way of telling the state of the battery. Now, there are some companies that are starting to launch a product where they'll come in, plug in the diagnostic and print out a sheet stating the state of health of the battery. And they're obviously going to charge the dealership a fee for that. Can't remember the name of the company. I think there's at least two that are trialing that. And it's something they're looking to give to the car auctions as well, so they can provide some information about the battery. That's yet to happen, but it certainly would be a good thing for dealerships to offer.
Yeah, especially as cars are getting a bit older now, they're sort of getting into the 5-6
yes.
year range for a lot of them.
Yeah. But again, the old Nissan Leaf, the 30 kilowatt Nissan Leaf, I'd avoid like the plague, because that has known to cook its battery due to a variety of reasons, although the 24 kilowatt hour Leaf with a smaller battery is actually a better battery than the one with a 30. The 40 kilowatt hour, again, was different battery chemistry, and that's proving to be okay with regard to capacity over time. So there's only one I would avoid, and that's the 30 kilowatt Leaf, because it can be very unpredictable and can degrade heavily. But all the rest are pretty good. Even the Mitsubishi i-MiEV, Citroen C0, the Peugeot Ion, that had basic thermal management in the early cars. We're talking cars 10, 12 years old, and they're still operating great. It was just the Nissan Leaf you've got to be wary of when it comes to battery.
I think one of the ones I found early on was a Kia Soul, which looks horrendous, but the reason I discounted it was more for the range. It was hovering around 120 real world.
Yes.
In terms of a comfortable car to sit in, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Bags of room.
So the early Kia the early Kia Soul was a 27 kilowatt hour size battery, and then about a year later they put a 30 kilowatt hour battery in. Both again are quite early chemistries, and time has proved that they do degrade significantly at year 7, year 8. So again, it's just the early Kia Souls and the early Nissan Leaf that you've just got to be wary of on the battery.
Good to know. Well, I think that was all my questions. Unless there's anything else you want to add, I'll say thank you for your time.
No, that's right. I'm glad to help. It's nice that you're going down the route of owning an EV. And the internet's, there is a lot of nerdy people out there, but there's a lot of good information as well that you can pick up.
It's too much almost.
But you're doing the right thing. And I'm glad you reached out to ask. And again, thank you for coming on and being interviewed. And this hopefully will help other people make that switch like you're doing as well. Have you got anything in mind that your gut is telling you to look at seriously?
My top three contenders at the moment are the Model 3, the Nero 4 Plus, and an Ioniq, the base Ioniq, not the Ioniq 5.
Yes.
And I've heard the Ioniq is probably better in a hybrid than it is in an EV, just because the initial battery is a little bit shaky.
So I ran an Ioniq, that's the original Ioniq. It's known as the wind knife because it cuts through wind. It's so aerodynamic. Looks as ugly as anything from the front, but it's so aerodynamic and super efficient. We ran one for the best part of 2 years. My wife loved it. Great car. The 28 and the 38 kilowatt hour is a really fine EV. For me personally, it was too low. I'm 6'4", so other than that's the reason I went for the Nero. It's just easy for me to get in and out of.
That's completely the same. And there are a few others in that sort of class that either they're only 2 years old, so they're not quite affordable enough yet, like the Model Y and the Model X.
Yes.
The Skoda Enyaq. Just a few more years, and I think they'll be affordable.
Yes.
And then for the MG ZS, I loved it, but the steering wheel only went up and down. It wasn't telescopic.
Yeah.
So I found that I was sitting too far back and I was having to reach too far forwards.
Yeah.
But there's all sorts out there. And the Kona was very good, but I felt it was a little bit small.
A little bit small on the inside. Yeah, it's the sister car to the Nero. Overall, which is why I run one, is I like the Kia e-Niro, particularly the 4 Plus for all the extras that I find essential. But it's the 7-year warranty that does it for me. So I bought mine. I'd already leased it, bought it at 3 years old. I've got another 4 years of warranty. And the warranty covers absolutely everything. If a switch falls off the dashboard, and it'll be covered by warranty. So the warranty for Kia for me is a real no-brainer, if you don't mind the looks.
And you just hit the nail on the head of why I like it. It's because it has buttons.
Yes.
For a first-time driver, I'm quite nervous. I want a car with as many safety features as I can.
Yeah.
And the one thing about Model 3 is I've got to take my eyes off the road.
Yeah.
I just want a car where I've got the buttons and I need to know where they are. Mental picture.
Yeah. It's quite a conventional car. You can jump in within a couple of minutes. You can figure out where all the things are, and it's quite intuitive. So
the paddles as well felt especially nice. It's quite nice being able to toggle the regenerative braking on and off.
Definitely,
It made a big difference.
And that's something you can't do in the Teslas. So it's just all regulated by your foot inputs on the throttle. But I love driving my Nero with zero regen on the long flat roads because that makes it more economical, and then just using the flappy paddles to brake. My only word of advice long term, if you get any EV, is once a week jump on the brakes, drive it like a lunatic. Well, not like a lunatic. Drive it quickly, jump on the brakes, do everything that your brain's telling you not to do, because that will keep the discs nice and clean and stop them getting corroded. Because a big thing with a lot of EVs that are driven correctly is they need new discs after 4 or 5 years because they're just never used. They're barely used. So it will actually save you money by jumping on the brakes at least once a week.
No, that's good advice because it is very easy to just do one pedal.
It is.
Driving.
And it is a satisfying way to drive. But jump on them brakes once a week.
Good to know.
Well, anyway,
Sarah, thank you for your time.
Great to talk to you. It's a pleasure. And drop me an email when you've found something and see how you get on.
Yeah, I'll send you some photos with any luck.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah.
Have a nice day.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye. So thanks to Sarah for agreeing to be on camera. and I hope she enjoys her electric vehicle as and when she gets one. I think she's definitely going to take that step, as her first vehicle is going to be all electric. So other than her learning in a fossil fueled Clio, her first actual vehicle will be all electric, which pleases me greatly. Now, I've got no vested interest. I'm not dealing anymore. I've retired. So it was just an opportunity for me to help her along the way, and I hope this video has helped you if you're considering getting into electric vehicles. As always, please don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button. It really does help my little channel, and I'll see you next time.